Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Kyle Tolsman, and you're listening to the Against All Average podcast, episode 16, the show where business owners and entrepreneurs come to learn the skills and mindset to lead exceptional lives. Today, I am joined by the one and only Jake. I used to drink Coors Heavy, but now I like a nice White Claw on the porch. Spurley. What's up, Jake?
Oh, Kyle, you did it again. Your intros are just getting better and better, buddy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jeez, how are you, man?
I'm good. We went out to the Dalles yesterday and we're swimming around on the Deschutes and trying to avoid the rattlesnakes out there. I didn't have my boots on, so I got a little nervous and just turned back. There's a lot of hikers that are saying there's a bunch of rattlesnakes on the trail, and we were walking right along the water, and there's grass on the left and grass on the right. And I don't know, when you have 3 kids and you don't really feel like going to the hospital and you can't keep them on the trail, I just had to be like, yeah, let's turn around. The kids just wanted to go swimming anyway. So we drove 2 hours to go swimming for about 20 minutes. So that's what I've been up to. How about you?
Oh, just working away. 4th of July was, a couple days ago. Had a great time out on the water, boating with a couple buddies, and been enjoying this nice weather until today, living it up.
Yeah, no, it's sprinkling a little bit, but hey, the crops need it, right, Jakey?
Crops need it to grow, baby. You got to water them.
They're thirsty. All right. So, hey, Jake, what's your suggestion for somebody that is just always flipping through Facebook? They're always looking through Instagram. They're wasting a bunch of time constantly. What's your advice for an entrepreneur like that that's just wasting tons of times on this TikTok and Snapchat nonsense all day long?
Well, yeah, stop knocking TikTok. TikTok's great. Please don't bash it. But the only reason I feel even like remotely qualified to answer this question is because I was that person. And I'm not that person. So my advice is just delete it. I deleted Facebook off my phone. I don't go in. The only reason I have Instagram still is just for work, to respond to our company pages. Other than that, I haven't checked it, looked at anything. I think Twitter is about the dumbest thing out there. TikTok I still have because that's just a feel-good thing that I do in the morning. I do at night, kind of relax and unwind. But my suggestion is just delete it, right? I think not only is it a time sucker, you also inadvertently start comparing your life to other people's lives, right? Kyle and I have talked about Instagram as a highlight reel of somebody's life, and it's not what their day-to-day life is. And you can get sucked into kind of the mantra of it, and trying to compare yourself. And they're out drinking with the boys. Like, why am I not drinking with the boys? Well, because that's the first time they've done it all year. So my advice: get rid of it. You don't need it.
Yeah, just create content for your business posts, interact a little bit, maybe set a time limit and go from there. So that's great little insight, Jake. Thank you. Let's thank our sponsor. We love our sponsors on the Against All Average podcast. When you need all things digital looking their best, call our friends at S.A.M Pro Services. Our friends will give you the above all average treatment with a full line of printing services, custom graphics, social media management, you name it, you need it, they have it. S.A.M, the trusted partner of the Against All Average podcast. Man, I'm jacked up. We get to talk sales and leadership and business presence. Oh, it's going to be wonderful, Jake. You don't even know.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how jacked up are you? Because I'm about like a 9.5, and I feel like you're a little above me.
Oh, I don't know. Like, I'm Irish red in the face, fired up right now. I'm like a 12 right now. I get to talk to a long time friend of mine, Dalton, and he is going to come on and absolutely blow our minds. Let's just introduce him. I mean, I could babble, but like his introduction is so gold that the listeners don't even know it's going to hit them. So let's do this. In this episode,
get right into it, dude.
All right, here we go. In this episode, we have a true gem of an individual. If he wasn't so busy selling software, leading sales teams, eating delicious food, boating, and being an overall amazing human being, he would have already been the champion of the WWE and retired while he still had his pride left. Man, if we both went into pro wrestling at the same time, we would have been the most epic tag team duo of all freaking time. Dalton Van Hatcher has spent the last 13 years in various sales leadership roles in enterprise software and technology startups. He was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, and went to school to play collegiate lacrosse at Bentley University in Boston, Massachusetts. He was able to join the legendary BladeLogic team as a sales development rep, and in 2007 went through a very successful IPO and acquisition. Dalton was also employee number 27 at Sumo Logic and has held various leadership roles at companies like ThinkingPhones / Fuze, BMC Software, and currently he runs the sales department for Vapor.io. They just completed $90 million in Series C funding. So I know Dalton's super excited about that and seeing his company grow like it has, and to be part of something that cool. And they're based out of Austin, Texas there. And lastly, Dalton advises several startups here in the Pacific Northwest and is also the co-chapter head and chairman of Seattle Revenue Collective. Also, he's a board member of the Jernigan Foundation, which provides education, support, and a lot of different services for at-risk youth and victims of human trafficking. Here to bring the thunder is Dalton D. Money Van Hatcher. What's up?
What's up, guys? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound beautiful, dude.
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, no, Kyle, I would absolutely, love to pick up some WWE. I think we could still make it. DDP, just for the record, didn't start his career till he was 34 years old. So we still got time, baby. Let's go.
Oh man, I just need to see the back surgeon real quick, get a couple adjustments, and I'll be throwing down the thunder. I'll never leave you behind, buddy.
Oh man, we would absolutely destroy. I can't wait. So.
Oh man, I'll tell you a funny story. We used to, on Saturday mornings, my dad and I, my brother, we used to sit on the couch in our underwear and we'd be watching WWF and WWE wrestling, whichever it was at that time. And we'd make peanut butter egg sandwiches with a little half glass of milk and just pound it down. And we thought wrestling was the best thing. So that's what we've always shared in common, is a true love for some good pro wrestling.
Absolutely. And as you know, I know, Kyle, you got some kids heading into middle school. Just a pro tip here for my parents, when they were trying to get me to calm down back in my middle school days, the only thing that could work was when they took away Thursday night SmackDown from me. And I had to ask my friends at school, obviously pre-internet, had to ask my friends at school, what was the lowdown from last night on, Friday morning. And my friend just couldn't describe it for me. So I would, I'll just say that that was the one that got me. I told my mom that recently. I didn't want to admit it, but that was the one that made me pay attention in school a little more.
Oh, that is freaking phenomenal. That's so funny. Yeah, I have to find all sorts of ways to calm down my my wild 7-year-old. Not being able to go to school and things are a little weird. There's a lot of time spent teaching him life lessons, but I think he's teaching me more. He's teaching me how to breathe and calm down and find a better punishment for him, because some of it's just not working right now. Oh man. All right, Dalton. So let's have the listeners kind of figure you out a little bit. Can you take us back as far as you can remember? What do you remember about your childhood? Where are you from? What schools did you go to? Like, what are your fondest memories growing up?
Yeah. So Kyle, you and I grew up together, and, you kind of know a little bit about this, but for the listeners, I spent most of my time in a gym. Actually, my father was a athletic director and lacrosse coach at my school, and various other sports as well. And so I spent a lot of time just at the athletic facility at this school called Oregon Episcopal School. And that kind of shaped me as a person. But I think, my experience in sports and actually watching my father, who is in the Oregon Lacrosse Hall of Fame, as well as the Oregon Athletic Directors Association Hall of Fame, really kind of shaped my leadership skills. And so I was around a lot of these coaches at OES and around my father, who was, constantly dealing with parents and dealing with, the coaches and dealing with, building excellence in sports. It really shaped me as a person. And I think as I kind of grew into my own a little bit in terms of personality, as you know, I'm not a very shy or quiet person. And I think that my mom was also a school teacher in elementary, and she did all the different grades. But I think my parents, weren't really, indoctrinated into the business world, yet they knew that, sales and business was, at a very early age, I knew it was something I wanted to do. And it probably had a lot to do with my ability to not shut up at sometimes, continuously talk. But that was really, kind of what shaped me. And I think the other kind of interesting point was, inflection point for me was, my father had actually played lacrosse on the East Coast in Springfield, Massachusetts. He actually went there sight unseen to Springfield College. And I did the same. So I went into a school, Bentley University, and, was recruited to play there, and really wanted to use my athletic ability to go to the top school I could go to, because lacrosse is one of those sports where you really need to be thinking about careers beyond lacrosse. It's a very small percentage that make a living out of it, as you know. But and I know you're doing that successfully in coaching, but in terms of pro lacrosse, there's just not a lot of outlets and things of that nature. So back then, I took a big risk going to school on the East Coast, didn't know a single person. I think for the first time in my life, growing up at a small school like OES, where you basically, it's a K through 12. I knew all the coaches, they all knew me. I knew all the parents, all the teachers, and then you get dropped at a university 3,000 miles away. Stuff gets real quick. So that was kind of a defining moment for me. But yeah, I kind of cut my chops on the lacrosse field, was very successful in Oregon, and then the East Coast is next level, and kind of got rocked there a little bit, but had to kind of fight through it. And that was a fun experience for me that's definitely bled into my post collegiate career and my adult business career.
Awesome. Sometimes I just sit back and I get kind of mesmerized hearing people's stories, especially people I know. And it's just like, sometimes I forget, well, do I actually have to host this show? Like, do I actually have to ask Dalton another question, or can you just keep on talking and telling me these?
Oh, I can keep talking. Don't worry about that.
No, we'll get you. And Jake will chime in after I ask this question. He's going to fire off a few for you. But your dad was an AD and your mom was a teacher. If you could tell us one thing from each of them that you learned that helps you out as a successful, and I don't want to just say successful person, I want to talk about, and we don't mean success just in the form of business. You do a lot of different things, and we are always preaching to be an amazing human being, to be well-rounded, and you're a great inspiration for our listeners because you do so many different types of things. Talk a little bit about dad and mom and what they brought to the table that really helped you in your roles, in your multiple roles that you do today.
Absolutely. I think from my father, a couple of things that really stand out was he's a great people person. So, in business and in life in general, having those types of skills are very critical for a lot of, different career paths. But I think that when it comes to my father also, one thing I really learned was he was really big on building a program and a system. And, I run sales at a company, Vapor.io, and I've led these giant teams, and we recruit, train, and develop, talent. And I think that those skill sets, like, my father and Kyle, you do a great job of this in your coaching career. You have to go down and spend time with the third graders, the fourth graders, all the way through. And it's no different. The top sales leaders that are out there, they know, all of their people. They're not afraid to roll up the sleeves and get down there with the SDRs or the kind of frontline workers in the sales world. And I think that, if you're going to build an excellent program and a championship program, and that, completely, attains to the business world, if you're going to have one of these startups and really go after it and and grow and become, an absolute powerhouse, you have to get everyone moving on in the same direction on all cylinders. And I think my father really, really did a good job of that at Oregon Episcopal School, and is really involved in the dedication, not just at the high school level, but the program and building the system of that. And then for my mother, I think balance, to your point. It's not just about success in sales or success in business. It's balance. And my mother taught me that at a very young age, is you have to have balance. I think my father spent a lot of time. We were there at 7 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night, pretty much every single day, 6 days a week. Sunday was the only day we weren't really at OES. And I think that I saw, kind of the effects of that, and, dedicating your entire life to that. But my mom was very, she was making sure that I was well-rounded and looked at other things and looked at the world differently. And it's not just about sports or success or winning. Success means multiple things, and you have to really, look into that. And if you want to, be happy, and you want to, be successful in life, it's really, and getting the most out of life, it's balance. It's having balance and being well-rounded in a lot of different things. And I think that's kind of the lesson I learned from my mother there.
Wow. Yeah. I would think, especially in your role now, leading a whole sales team, that takes a lot of balance, right? Because you could easily get consumed. So I guess this kind of your line about talking with the frontline workers really hit home for me. My brother's the vice president of sales for Cessna. And, I see kind of like what you're talking about. I see a lot in what he does, and he has to balance kind of that, he could work, midnight to midnight every single day if you wanted to, but it's kind of that balance of how do you balance it. And I think it's really cool that you kind of learned that, from your mom. And it was, I don't know, just kind of sparked a little something there. Talk about BladeLogic. How was it working for them? What were the bumps in the road? Kind of give us the deets on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of an interesting story how I got connected to him. My father, like I was saying, he didn't really know anything about business. He's been an athletic director and teacher. Literally, he was like one of the youngest ADs in Oregon history. He got the job when he was 22 years old, and this is the school he went to high school with. So he hadn't spent a lot of time outside of OES. But one thing that was really interesting when I was looking at jobs and on the job hunt, I had five different offers lined up in various roles, mostly in marketing and sales. I knew I wanted to be in sales, so I was going to take a sales position. But my father actually told me, and this is actually really relevant in the business world, in the sales world. My father gave me a phone number, and he said to call this guy. And he said, I don't know a lot about business, but I have a friend who does. He lives in Boston. You should call him. And so I called him, and at the time, BladeLogic had been recruiting. They came after me. A person by the name of Brian Scott hired me, and he runs a company actually called Tone It Up Fitness, very successful company down in Manhattan Beach. But he went to Bentley also, and I didn't really know him at Bentley, but his boss, John McMahon, who's this legendary guy, had asked to recruit captains of sports teams at top colleges, business colleges. And so they had been recruiting me, but it was a little odd because they were coming after me versus the other jobs where I had to go and interview and was stretching for it. And actually, one of the jobs was it was a pretty enticing job. It was it was in the marketing department at the NFL for Reebok, which would have been a really cool position. But I called this guy just out of the blue. He was not expecting my call. Typical Hatch, Kyle. He was not expecting my call, so I had to explain who I was. And I told him the offers, and he just said, "Look, I know the VC behind this company, BladeLogic. I don't want to hear about the other offers. You need to take this job." And so I took the job, and lo and behold, I didn't really know at the time, but I was working for this legend, John McMahon, who is kind of the godfather, if you will, of enterprise sales, and he built this whole sales process. This proven sales process, and he actually sits on the board at companies like MongoDB, Datadog, and Snowflake, which are in MongoDB and Snowflake is about to IPO, and Datadog had a very successful IPO. So he, is a legendary kind of sales leader, and it was crazy. I got to work under him. And within this first I think it was about 8 months in, we went through a very successful IPO. I was an SDR at the time before SDRs were really a thing. Now there's, you see a lot of sales development reps or business development reps, whatever you want to call it, or account development reps, but there really wasn't that concept. But it was awesome. I got to work with all these great leaders. And one of the things I learned early on, and John McMahon taught me this, was, one of the great parts about being an SDR, you work with these reps, you work with these managers, and you work with marketing, and you bridge a lot of gaps. But he taught me you need to watch what makes everyone really good at their job, and you need to keep learning. And he's like, look, I'm, at the time he was probably in his 40s or 50s, but he's, I've had multiple conversations with him over the years, and he'll tell you, like, at the minute you stop learning and you stop learning new things, you're done. You shouldn't work anymore. And the reality is, you have to go through these processes, and you have to learn. You can't really skip steps. If you want to help other people, you have to go through these experiences yourself. And so, I was kind of taught that early on, but we were acquired for almost $1 billion right after the IPO. So we did the double whammy, which was awesome. And we got bought by a company called BMC Software, where I spent another 4 or 5 years after that. But going through the IPO and acquisition and learning in business school about these things, and then actually living through it was crazy. And it was a huge IPO at the time. I think it was the second largest IPO at the time. The only one that was larger was VMware. And the tech crash happened during this, but our company, we went into BMC. We actually got rid of 40% of the sales force. Our leadership team took over a lot of the leadership positions there, but we reduced the sales force by 40%, but we increased revenue by, I think it was like 300 or 400%. So wow. It was a wild ride where we went into a very large, BMC at the time was the fourth largest software company in the world. And, it was a big company. So it's really interesting to go through the small company, kind of getting consumed by the bigger company. Yet our sales leadership team really took a lot of leadership positions in the bigger company. So it was a very interesting, thing to go through for sure.
Going off that, because it seems like you got into BladeLogic fairly early. Mm-hmm. And if there were a couple things that you could say, like, this was the differentiator for us that really made us go big, or like, this was our, one trick to getting into that certain customer in the SaaS world, what is that?
Yeah. So when we talk about, we talk about the mantra, when we talk to customers, and having kind of, there's a difference of holistic differentiators, competitive differentiators. So holistically, like, how are you as a company better than, some of these other companies? Competitive differentiators, how do you specifically do it, versus your competition? Like, a lot of times people tackle, the same problem different ways. And then when you talk about unique differentiators, that's when I was at BladeLogic, that was something we talked about a lot. It's, what is our unique differentiator? And having all of those folks, having everyone on the sales floor and everyone all the way through, all the way up to the CEO, kind of beating to the same drum around those differentiators, that was a big part of it. And, we, at the time, BladeLogic is kind of an automation company. We were doing what's called compliance and configuration management, but we had this roles-based access control and the ability to roll back applications on demand. And at the time, that was a really big differentiator, because if you wanted to find a problem, you would basically have to go manually pinpoint this, but we could actually roll back the application. So if your website was down, let's say your Visa and your applications are down, so you have all these people that can't access, payment, you could actually go back to the last known well state and roll back automatically. So at least the site was up and running, so you wouldn't lose money, while other people would basically have to go in and manually find the problem and manually fix the problem, which could take hours or days. When you're talking about, someone like Visa or Walmart or Chevron, these big giant Bank of America, these big customers, you're talking about millions and millions of dollars. And so, that was kind of everyone knew about the competitive differentiators, and we all were quizzed on them. And, I think one of the kind of pieces I'd say too, for everyone, if you're starting out in sales, if, I didn't know anything about the technology I was selling. I had to learn it all. And, the first 3 months, I would say it was just, learning data center 101, and we used cards, flashcards to study this and learn the lingo and understand it. And I think a lot of companies, they will push people early into a sales position without really giving them the understanding of what they're selling. And I think everyone, I use this process called S.A.M, which is story, activity, and mindset. If you're going to attack the day, and you're working in a sales or for any company and you're selling, what's the story? What story is your company telling? And then what activity do you need to do to be successful? And then what's the mindset that you need to get into? And understanding the customer mindset is super important as well. And I think BladeLogic did an exceptional job, and most of their sales leaders are now CROs at these multi-billion-dollar tech companies, the hottest tech companies in the world. And I think they did a really good job of training, reps on that piece before they got on the phones, before they are in front of customers. Because, when it's high stakes like this, where you're talking about millions of dollars, you might get the right person on the phone. And if you don't get that meeting, that's a big account that your competitor has access to. So I think that was kind of the story there.
Right.
That's awesome. It's just, that's so much action packed in that conversation in the last 5-10 minutes. Talk specifically about what you do now at Vapor.io and what training looks like. I know a lot of companies, their success is usually measured by their training programs. Like, how are you able to, what does the actual training process look like? Let's say I get hired tomorrow. I'm probably working virtually. What do I have at my fingertips to be successful at Vapor.io? And what do you personally do to move your sales team from beginner to intermediate to advanced? And how do you hold everybody accountable with that training?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so Vapor, just really quickly, so Vapor is based in Austin, Texas, and we are taking micro-modular data centers and putting them at the base of cell towers. And the reason you would do that is for low latency edge computing use cases. So think of drones, think of autonomous vehicles, think of 5G. And we are selling a service that is, it's kind of co-location where wireline meets wireless. And so think power space cooling from a data center perspective, where the wireless towers are, because if you're talking about an autonomous vehicle, for example, if you are driving, or autonomous vehicles driving, and I think it's 10 milliseconds of latency is about 60 feet of that car stopping, which obviously is a safety issue. So the way the internet's built today is just not going to work for these types of use cases. So it's a tall task, but we are re-architecting the internet as we speak, which is really cool to be part of. But yeah, in terms of training, I mean, we have a very complex product, Vapor.io. We are bridging the gap between wireline and wireless and data center, as well as kind of edge computing and these edge native applications. And I think, for us, that we actually have an advantage because we're a very small company. So we have a very large investor by the name of Crown Castle, which owns the majority of the cell towers and the fiber footprint to those towers in the US, and they're a $40 billion company. So we have access to a lot of and share resources with Crown. But, when you're talking about training, we have a fairly small team, which actually is super helpful from a training standpoint, because, we do have tools and we do an onboarding process, but honestly, the biggest thing with training, it comes down to management. And I think when I say management, it's developing the right way. And so, when new reps come aboard, we are on calls with them. They're sitting on calls with me, and we're breaking down before the call the strategy of, what's the success criteria of this call, how is it going to go, why are we going through asking these questions. Then we ask the questions, objection handling and basically maneuver, and then we break down. This is where a lot of leaders falter, in my opinion, is you have to break down. You have to sit down after the call with these reps, and you have to give them an understanding why you said these things. If you just move on to the next step and focus on the next step, they're not really going to learn why it's important. You have to get to the why. And I think that our process, we do a lot of training on the product and show demos, and we provide them with various PDFs and these types of things. But the reality is that the easiest way and the best way, in my opinion, is to have them ride along with you, or to sit on the call and be part of the conversation. But you got to break it down. If you don't break it down, they're not going to learn.
And you've been in athletics. Your parents are both teachers. That probably just has set you up to be a great teacher, right?
Absolutely. And look, like when you're running successful sales, if it's in tech, it doesn't even matter if it's in retail or manufacturing. You're just as good as your people. And I think that a lot of companies, they get this wrong. You have to train and develop, and it's not just, to your point, Kyle, it's not just training at the beginning and getting them up to speed. It's consistent training. And one of the things, kind of back to what Jake was talking about, my BladeLogic days, my advice for folks out there is really to look at these companies. If the company is if you have a leader that's like digging into your resume or digging into your experience and saying, hey, look, I don't think you have this experience, you're not qualified, it's risky. A lot of times it's because that person is too lazy or doesn't want to train you on those things, or doesn't know how to. But the reality, you should run away from those opportunities, in my opinion. You should run to the opportunity where the person who is, well qualified, has great experience, is telling you, we're going to develop you and train you. You may have a gap here, but here's how we're going to fix that gap. If you find yourself in that position, you should run to those opportunities, because you can't put a price tag on that. And I think a lot of people choose companies based on, salary, based on maybe the market, whatever it may be. But the reality is, you could go to these companies and there may be a giant leader who's a CRO or a CEO, but you're not going to spend time with that person. So who are the people you're going to be spending time with, and how are they going to make you better? And one thing I would add too, a lot of people in my industry, they have the same experiences. They work for different companies and they think they're having different experiences, but they're having the same experience over and over again at different companies. And they think that that's true because it's a different company or a different industry. But the reality is you really have to think about experiences and think about what's going to make you well-rounded as a leader. To my point earlier, if someone needs your help and you're in a giant leadership position and you haven't been through that before, how are you going to help them? And so getting as many experiences as possible makes you a better leader. It makes you a better coach because you can help more people, and it's more robust. You're more robust in the way that you're helping those people.
Right. You talked earlier about S.A.M, story, action, and mindset. Is that correct?
Story, activity, and mindset. Yep.
Story, activity,
same thing.
Mindset.
Action. Yep.
And so you talked a little bit in the hiring process. You're really looking, if you're the one hiring, you're actually looking for people that have that M, right? They have the mindset to be successful. They're willing to learn. They're willing to grind. They don't know everything. Talk a little bit about your hiring process. When you look at resumes or you're doing a Zoom interview, we're in the COVID stages right now, and you're doing some Zoom interview, like, what are you specifically looking for? Do you look at the resume
Absolutely.
more? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah. So when we hire, the things we look for are integrity, intelligence, drive, and coachability. Those are the four main things. And so, obviously, intelligence. It's a little bit harder to do just in an interview. But a lot of times, what we'll do is ask them a question to really understand how they got to that answer. you want to ask them to do a little quiz, or you want to ask them to, solve a problem, and you want to understand how they solve that problem. And that's a good way to look at it. Obviously, if they sold something complex or they had to move into a new industry, those are key indicators that, they had success at that they're very smart and intelligent. Schooling is another way that's not the end all be all, but some people, take a look at what college they went to, or, what things they had to learn in the past. But by all means, sales, in my opinion, you don't need a college degree to be sales. These are people skills. It's human skills that make you successful. And I think, to your point around drive. So when you talk about the action and activity, it's the drive. So understanding what drives that person, why they want to be successful, like ask them, walk them, have them walk through a day of, like, when you were in this position, walk me through what you would do on a daily basis. You really need to understand what drive they have. You'll see a lot of it in how they prepare for the interview. They're not preparing for the interview, then, I don't know if they want it that bad. And integrity is huge. I mean, you got to do the right thing in today's world. There's so much, bad going on there. You need people with integrity, and doing the right thing is key. And, I've seen all sorts of crazy stuff, and, that stuff will put it into your career, in today's world. And so, having integrity is huge. And that one's a little harder to see on in person, but, just really understanding them. I like to get to know a person before I work with them, because if you don't know who they are and what makes them tick and where they want to be in 10 years, how are you going to make them successful? But really having those conversations is important. And then coachability is key. So, a lot of companies, like the companies I work for, we have our own sales process, and it's proven, and it's what we use, and the whole company's doing that process. So if you have someone who is going to defy that process, or is not willing to learn. Now, of course, we want people to be constantly reshaping the process and bring fresh new ideas to the process, and we'll add to it. But if you have someone who just is not going to be coachable, it's going to be painful. And I've made some of those mistakes where I didn't trust my gut, or I went on a limb. But I've also asked some questions, or gotten a reaction, asked a question to see a reaction and how they reacted, and dodged some bullets because of those types of things. But those are really the 4 things, and I think that that's pretty universal for anyone in a business setting, or in a company setting. Those 4 things, if someone has those people are going to be successful no matter what they do. And I think that where I see the most, to your point, Kyle, where I see a lot of the challenges is in drive and coachability. That's usually where where I get hung up in not hiring a candidate.
That's awesome. Another, just a quick follow-up, and then Jake, I know, is just itching to ask some additional questions here. A follow-up to that is, you're on an interview, and this is for hiring managers, this is for CEOs, this is anybody that's listening that is needing to get the right hires in place. Do you find it hard when somebody goes too serious with you throughout the entire interview and never breaks character? What kind of questions do you ask to lighten up the mood so that you actually get to know the person and not get to know what the person knows? I hope that makes sense.
It totally does. And I think that right off the bat, and for me personally, it's just my style. Everyone has their own style, but I just really want to get to know the person. And I typically will talk about stuff outside of work before I even start. Unless they, really want to just talk about the ins and outs of the job, I really try to get to know the person and ask, what do you do outside of work? Like, what things do you enjoy? Because, look, we spend most of our adult time with our colleagues. And if you're not, if you don't like the people you're around or the company you're working for, it's going to be a rough one. And so I would caution everyone, really get to know your people. And also, if you're gonna lead someone and you take financial responsibility for their family, like, it's not just about that person, it's their family. it's their livelihood. And so you really have to get to know those people and know them on a personal level. And I would say that, most folks that don't break character. I mean, I personally haven't had too many of those experiences. But, I would just say that, if they aren't willing to have a leader that wants to get to know them, I would question if it's the right fit for that person or the company or culture is the right fit for that person.
Yeah, absolutely. Why? I guess we're talking about kind of hiring. I'm curious, why did you choose sales? And do you think, if you were to interview yourself back when you first got started, would you have hired yourself?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think I would have, based on the positions I was interviewing for. I mean, I was in the wheelhouse of, what the types of things that I want to do. I mean, I knew probably at 16 or 17 that I wanted to be in sales. And so, I mean, I had, offers in different schools for lacrosse, but I picked the business university with the best business program because I wanted to learn about business and sales and marketing. And I think that, a lot of folks struggle with finding, they don't know what they want to do. And it's actually really refreshing when someone knows exactly what they want to do. And, I was on a panel the other day, an interesting one. It was a Selling While Black panel, but one of the panelists was talking about just, some of the things going on today. But one of the things he said that stuck out in my mind was there's nothing more dangerous than someone who knows who they are and knows what they want to do. And I think a lot of people struggle with not knowing what they want to do and not knowing who they are, quite frankly. And it's a struggle. And it wasn't something that, just because I knew what I wanted to do, I didn't know who I was. And there was a struggle around that. But I knew I had, in my opinion, I probably would have hired myself as an SDR because I was a firecracker coming in there, like Yosemite Sam, guns a-blazing, saying I want to sell really expensive things and lots of it. And I want you to teach me how to do it and nothing's going to stop me. So I think that for me was that point. But look, I mentor a lot of people early in their sales career. I mentor people in the middle or, even later in their career. And I think that most of the time, to be honest, it's funny, like you would think that I'd be talking through deals or like how to deal with these things, but I usually talk to them about themselves. It's more of like a therapy session because the reality is it bleeds into everything you do. If you don't take care of yourself and take that seriously, how can you help others? If you're selling high profile software and solving, extreme business problems, I mean, these are critical decisions for customers and it's big for your company. If you're not taking care of yourself, you'll burn out and you can't really help anyone else. And so, most of the time when I'm taking someone on from a mentorship standpoint, it's, I think they think they're coming into a conversation where it's about, how do I get from A to B? And I, put it back on them. It's like, let's talk about you and where you are and like how your life's going. Because I think people get hung up on titles, they get hung up on money and these other things. But the reality is, everyone's looking to do what they love and love what they do. And you have to have the balance. And you have to have the work-life balance to be happy. And I think that a lot of people miss out on that. And then they're talking about, chasing some title or something that's irrelevant when some of the things they need to work on are right in front of their face already. That makes sense.
Right.
Jake.
Right. No, yeah. That's gold there. And it seems like just kind of talking more and more, you're involved in many things. And it seems like you thrive on extreme productivity. Talk a little bit about how you balance your work life and home life each and every day, especially since you're trying to coach, teach, and train other people on the importance of it.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, first and foremost, you have to, it takes a lot of planning. I mean, to Kyle, you guys were kind of talking or you were talking earlier about like the Facebook and the Instagram and it's a highlight reel, but no one really shows all the preparation and, sacrifices and things that you do behind the scenes. And like, for me, a great example is, as I grew up, I told you guys how I grew up at a gym and playing sports all the time. And so for me personally, I need to work out. In order to be my best self from a mental standpoint, I need to get my workout in and really, get those endorphins flowing and have that. So for me, it's like, it's a non-negotiable. Even if I'm tired or sore or, went out a little too late the night before, it doesn't matter. It's a non-negotiable for me. And that's the mindset you got to have. It's, it's how, if you want to be the best, it's no different than professional athletes. They have to, eat right. They have to work out right. You have to really have the right mindset. And I think, a lot of people get that wrong, or they learn that, it was something that I definitely got wrong for a while. Everyone goes through when you are traveling and on the road and you're just, constantly, doing 14-hour days, selling these things. I mean, you have to balance it out. And I think that, the mindset is really around planning, and you have to do some planning, and you have to be able to adjust on the fly too. Like when you're balancing all of these things are going to happen, and having an even keel is really important. Sales is, and business is going to go, it's going to have its ups and downs. And if you can stay even keeled, you're going to be better off. And I think, keeping the balance and keeping that mindset and keeping an even keel allows you to do so. And the other piece too is just, I would just add to all of this, is like separating emotions from decisions is extremely, big part of being able to balance things and do things. It's really taking a step back and understanding, like, okay, if I choose to do this instead of this, what are the consequences of it? And really thinking through it and not being emotional about it. Because as you can imagine, balancing a lot of different things and training and managing teams, you're going to get pulled in all sorts of directions, but you really have to get in the mindset of what are the most important tasks that need to get done. And you know what? This is a big part of leadership's that too. A lot of leaders, remember when I was kind of talking about getting in there and going to the meeting and being there with the rep. A lot of leaders don't do that. And it kind of pisses me off, to be honest, because it's important. It's important for you with your people to be there in their success, but more importantly, to be there in their failures. It's just like raising kids. It's very similar. Each person, each salesperson or leader that you're managing has different needs, and you have to treat it that way. And it's really important to be there for them when things go well, but like I said, more importantly, when things go wrong, so that you can help them learn, because everyone learns from your failures. You learn from the successes too, but the best learning you're ever going to do is from your failures.
Well, and I love what you're just saying there. And Jake says it a lot with his sales team. He does something very similar. And one, he always tries to keep his sales folks in their strengths. But two, it's kind of what you said. You've got to find different ways to coach people with different personalities. You could light me up. It's not going to work. Like I don't take that very well. But if you tell me actionable steps that is going to help my sales process, I'm going to want to jump through this freaking screen and give you the biggest hug, because I'm so excited that you took the time to teach me, and that may change my life. So I think you really hit the nail on the head. We've got to make sure that we treat each of our employees differently. It's not that we don't hold them accountable. It's how we talk to them. It's how we praise them. And we have to understand that little Johnny may want a Starbucks card, but Amy over here would rather have a 5-minute Zoom call, just you and her, talking about ways that she can help the business, which entail helps her skills, etc. So I love that point, Dalton.
Yeah, and I would just add on that that comes a lot from my parents being teachers, but it's so critical, and people miss it all the time. You got to meet people where they are, and I think that people get lost in quotas and success and building these things and VC funding and all of these things. But the reality, if it's no different than what I said about getting to know your people. If you don't know your people, how are you going to manage them? And if you don't know how they think and how they learn, how are you going to manage them? How are you going to train them when the new product comes out or something your company has to adjust because something like COVID? If you don't understand how your team will react to it, or you don't understand how they learn and how to help them adjust, it's going to be rough for you. And so it's just that whole system of like, we try to strive at the companies I've worked for. We always talk about like a 5-to-1, like anyone who's managing over 5 people. I mean, it's really hard to be, in some jobs it completely makes sense, but in my world of enterprise software and technology, it's really tough to have a team, bigger than that, where you're really, to your point, Kyle, like really responsible for their development in their career. And so we always try to have kind of a 5-to-1 ratio. And of course, there's always exceptions and things don't work out as well. But, when you're scaling out a business, the great leaders, you should be hiring people better than you. You should be hiring people different than you. We talk about diversity a lot, and it's not just about, color of skin or, ethnicity. It's also diversity of mindset. You shouldn't, like, if you had a bunch of me's running around, something like COVID comes and I don't know, I'm not skilled at adjusting in a certain way, like you're the end all of your team. And so we talk a lot about, strong leaders and great leaders. They know how to recruit and A players know how to recruit A players. And, it's always, I take pride personally in hiring people with different mindsets, because it's I learn things from them every single day. It's really important.
And that's something that I got wrong when I started coaching. I didn't think that I really needed to develop my coaches. I had a fundamental misunderstanding that I only needed to develop players. And this light bulb went on. I was just like, well, if I could put my mind, my lacrosse understanding, my lacrosse mind into my other coaches' heads, think about how much more productive we can be. And of course, it's a no-brainer with sales, right? You want to train your coaches, so to speak, so that they can deliver that message, deliver it well. They know the story, they know what actions they're going to take, and they have that positive mindset. But I mean, that was something when I started out coaching, I was negligent in developing my coaches. And once I realized it, I felt bad. Like, I felt really bad about not getting my coaches to the next level, not getting my 5th, 6th grade coach the confidence, mindset, and knowledge to eventually become a JV coach, a varsity coach, and maybe move on to collegiate lacrosse if that is what they wanted. So that's definitely an aha moment for me. Jake, what else do you have for Dalton? I know you have another couple questions. You're sitting there firing in the background.
Well, I mean, I can just go on and on about software sales, but I don't want to target this too much. I mean, you kind of talked a lot about developing people, and I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like you can get a good understanding of how successful a salesperson is going to be based off of kind of how they deal with kind of the work-life balance, right? If they're going to just be all sales 100,000% of the time, they're going to probably get burnt out quickly. What is one of your biggest pet peeves of salespeople?
Yeah, I would say that, salespeople don't listen. So they hear what they want to hear. And that's, buyers will tell you that's like their number one. They don't understand my business or what we do, and they don't listen. And that's the common mistake. If you want to sell to someone, and selling's about trust, especially when it's, these multi-million-dollar or big contracts, you have to earn their trust. You have to have a great product. You have to, you have to help them kind of, sell internally and build business cases. But most importantly, it's listening. This is just a skill in general that people struggle with in today's world. It's how do you, everyone wants to, I think a lot of this comes from the Facebook, Instagram. It's like everyone's kind of talking and projecting their life out, but no one's really listening. People feel alone. They don't feel like they're connecting with people. And it's the same thing. Like buying a $10 million contract with, from a software company is no different than buying your first house or car. The person on the other end, they don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to get burnt. They've probably been burnt before. So how do you listen? And a lot of salespeople, especially early on in their career, and even later, they have these habits that you can't really pull out of them, but it's it just comes down to listening, and really understanding, what the person's saying, and understanding why they're saying that, and having that discussion. And salespeople are quick on the draw to just hear, it's funny when I get some reps that are pretty early in their career, I go into a meeting, we do the meeting, and then I ask them, how did you think that meeting went? I don't say anything, and then tell me what this person said, and then you get 3 different answers from the people, and it's like,
because nobody's listening.
No one's listening, and no one is listening for, I was like, the objective, what was the success criteria? We say it. And I was like, did you hear when he or she said this? And then they're like, no. And I'm like, well, what? And I think, that's just subliminal. A lot of it comes down to, one of the funny things too, I learned early on was I went to a few of these big sales quarterly reviews, and you got these strong leaders on stage, and they come out guns a-blazing with Thunderstruck booming in the background. And, I was like, whoa.
The WWF
Seriously, it is. It's amazing. And you see these people on stage and they're captivating the audience. But the reality is, so at the time I was just like, whoa, I can't, that's going to take me years to get to that level. But the reality is they get coaching. A lot of them get executive coaching and training on how to speak and public speaking. And I've been through a little bit of it before, but one of the things that they kind of teach you is how to listen, how to pause, and really understand. And I think that a lot of salespeople, they're too enamored with what they're going to say and the message they're trying to get across in that meeting to get to the next step, that they forget to listen. And so that's my biggest pet peeve it's and this, Kyle and Jake, this goes, to marriage, it goes to relationships in life, it goes to anything. You can apply it to anything. Listening is an extremely important skill. And if you're going to develop someone, you need to listen and understand what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve. If you're trying to sell something to them, you need to understand, why that business is doing that. And people just, they just short-sighted, they hear what they want to hear, and they blow through it, and then at the end of the quarter the deal doesn't close, and they're like, why didn't this deal close? And it's, the person has no idea, they can't even comprehend, they didn't buy.
And you're saying this deals with relationships as well. I think the listeners can really connect to this. But the other night I was talking to my wife about real estate and different thoughts and different directions that we're going. And I was talking different numbers, and she's just like, at what point she's just like, stop. Like, I was like, what? She's like, I agree with you. It's like, I was
exactly. You're selling yourself on it too.
Yeah, I was just like, I was so fired up, man. I was just trying to get my WWE championship belt. Like I was going full throttle, I was just going. And she's just like, stop. And so I think that sometimes when we're on these sales calls, that's the other side, is just like, shut up. Like, I'm done listening to you. I already want your product. How do I pay for it? And you want to tell some life story for another hour. So I think the more in tune you are with your customers, the more questions you ask, not to ask freaking questions, but to listen to their answers and adapt the sales process to it, is always going to help sell whatever you're selling, even if it's in a relationship and you're just trying to sell your wife on, hey, I need 5 motorcycles instead of 1. Like, you're still going to have to listen and go through that process to figure out what their pain points are, so that you can have 5 motorcycles and rip around the neighborhood.
Exactly.
What so I guess for any new salesperson out there, maybe they're in software sales, it really doesn't matter. What have you found to be kind of the, not key to success, when, let's say the company doesn't have a very strategic sales process, they're a startup. What have you found that works best when you're just cold calling people out of the blue? Maybe it's a new company, the market doesn't even know who you are. What have you seen work well?
Yeah. So sales is, you hear this cliche term. It's like, what you put in is what you get out. But, and people always think like, oh, if you work hard, you'll make a bunch of money. But the reality is, it pertains to cold calling, because people don't do enough research. It's goes back to what I'm talking about with getting to know a person. Like, if you're getting, I always tell people I'm developing, it's like, you get cold calls all the time, or you get, people trying to sell you something, or, you get these phone calls or emails. Like, what makes you open it? And you have to think about that. You need to step into their shoes and work backwards from that. I mean, these are just people, just like everyone else. And so you have to really think through that. And I think that, the people that get it right, and in my experience, and when I've, hit the phones or, got us into big companies, they're just, they're people. You have to try to get to know them. And, fortunately, in today's world, there's a lot of information out there. So I would challenge you to get creative and really do your research. Like, LinkedIn's a great resource for that. You can look up different meetups that they may attend. Maybe they're, have a sports team. You can send them, something funny about sports. Maybe they're into cars. I've seen creativity around this, but you gotta stick out. Like, one, try not to look like you're automated, because that's an issue. People will just if it looks automated, they're probably not going to pay attention to it. And two, be creative, be different. You have to set yourself apart. And so, those are the types of things that I've done in the past. And the teams I've had have done all sorts of funny, interesting, creative pieces around that. But you got to try to get to know the person, and they're just they're just a person like you and me on the other end. So like, try to step into their shoes. And I think a lot of people, they forget that, and they just want to get their messaging out. But it's these people get hundreds of these emails and calls all the time, especially if it's a big company. Like, the bigger the company, then the more calls they're going to get. I mean, I get as a VP of sales, I get probably 20 or 30 people reaching out to me on a daily basis trying to sell me technology, sales technology tools. And I think for me, when I open the call, when I respond back, it's usually when they're really creative or they get to know me on a personal. I always take the time to respond back. And if I'm not the right person, or if I don't have a need, I'll try to find them the right, someone that does. But I think that would be my advice, is just, work backwards, put yourself in their shoes and work back from that.
Awesome. As we're closing out this call, I want you to talk about two things that you're really passionate about. The first one is the Revenue Collective in the Seattle area. And then the second one is the foundation that you help with. So if you could talk a little bit about what is the Revenue Collective and what has it meant to you over the years as you've continued to strive to be the best sales director you possibly can be.
Absolutely. So the Revenue Collective is really cool. It's started by a gentleman by the name of S.A.M. Jacobs, and he has the Sales Hacker podcast, actually. But the Revenue Collective essentially is top revenue leaders. So think CMOs, CROs, VPs of sales, anyone kind of in sales leadership or revenue operations. So, a lot of times it's sales strategy, sales operations, customer success. We are coming together, and we do have various chapters, but since COVID, it's all virtual. Before, we were meeting in person and having happy hours and dinners, and talking about what's working and what's not, and really helping each other from a career growth perspective. The average tenure of VP of sales is I think at one point it was 18 months, and it's probably more like a year at this point. And so, how do we make our career paths better? How do we support and advocate for each other? And so we're coming together and pulling the top revenue leaders. We're up to about 2,500 members across the globe, 28 different chapters. I run the Seattle chapter with Alyssa Gordon, and we have about 50 executives. We're a fairly new chapter, but we have about 50 executives in our chapter. But like I said, there's about 2,200, and we share best practices. And there's also an associates program. So if you're an individual contributor and you want to learn about, being a leader, these are great groups. It is a private membership. It's not a crazy fee by any means, but getting in there and learning from your peers and colleagues is extremely important. It's kind of next generation networking. And I would say for anyone that's really taking their career seriously and want to kind of learn the different tactics and how people are striving in these environments, to join something like that. And the Jernigan Foundation is awesome. So we it's my wife's family is where it started, and obviously Jessica Jernigan is her maiden name, but Tanya Jernigan has been just an absolute rock star in terms of getting out there and really helping folks. And so we're really focused on youth. and education and eliminating human trafficking. But the biggest thing that we're doing is we're working with organizations to really educate. We think that education is a big part of helping these people get out of these situations. We do provide resources, so we actually have various shelters where victims of human trafficking can go. But one of the cool things we're doing in Seattle is we're actually putting together an alliance. We've done this with sex trafficking, but we're doing it with human trafficking as well. And it's not just about the actual victim and the person who's committing the crime. It's about how do we nip this in the butt from the beginning. And I think that we have the hotels. We're doing training with hotels so they can see what human trafficking looks like. We have the police departments involved in it. We have local businesses involved in it. And so that we can really eliminate this and get the perpetrators off the street. And so it's a really cool process. But the Jernigan Foundation, we've been working with lots of global organizations. We have a school in South Africa, and we do a lot of different things all over the globe.
Oh, that's awesome. So it's so cool to hear how you spend your days. Talk to the listeners. What does your typical day look like when you're in Seattle, in the Seattle area, you're at home? Like, what does your normal day look like? Or is there no normal Dalton day?
No, so there definitely, to your point, there's 2 days. There's the day, my normal routine at home, and then there's the on the road traveling day. And I would tell you that the normal day for me is definitely, like I said, working out. I've been into yoga a lot lately, which is great way right out of bed, getting into doing some sort of yoga to kind of get your mind right. But, I'd say actually the day for me starts the night before I go to bed. I really plan out the next day and try to, put a rough draft of like what the day is going to look like and what are the 3 critical things I want to achieve of that day, and putting that together. But, the funny thing about that is you have to plan for adjustment because things happen throughout the day. And, as we all are getting older and have more responsibilities, you have to plan for that. But, if you kind of think through what your day, you want it to look like and what you want to get done, when these things pop up, you can kind of then take a step back, like I was saying before, and pick and choose, what are the consequences if I don't get this done? And like, is this really, important to get done? But you really have to plan it. And I think that, living and dying, I live and die by my calendar. I got a lot of calendars and they're in one. There's a few apps that like Calendly that are out there that will help you with that. But that's the point. That's really the point is you gotta plan it out.
Right. Awesome, Dalton. This episode, I think our listeners are going to go absolutely berserk over all the knowledge dropped. I can't thank you enough. In order to grow the Against All Average podcast, we need your help. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and tell a friend about every episode you find value in, and share the episode on your favorite social media platform. If you like the episode, please rate the episode and leave us a review. You can find us at Against All Average on all your favorite social media platforms and at www.againstakllaverage.com. Another big shout out to Dalton Money Van Hatcher and this episode sponsor, S.A.M Pro Services. And with that, we thank you for listening to episode 16 of the Against All Average podcast.